You know that feeling when you're watching a movie and something happens that's so unexpected, so perfectly orchestrated by the universe, that you actually get chills? That's exactly what happened to me, and I'm about to share every single detail with you. This isn't just another story about rich people and their drama, this is about how sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the one who changes everything. If you're someone who believes that what goes around comes around, that karma has a way of settling scores when we least expect it, then you need to hear this story. I'm talking about the kind of justice that feels almost too perfect to be real. But I lived it, I witnessed it, and I was the one who made it happen. This is about betrayal so deep it made my stomach turn, manipulation so calculated it would make your head spin, and a twist of fate so satisfying you'll want to tell everyone you know about it. But here's the thing, I need you to stick with me through every twist and turn, because this story builds in ways you won't see coming. Just when you think you know where it's heading, everything flips. And the ending. It's the kind of ending that makes you believe in justice again. That makes you realize sometimes the universe really is paying attention, though. If you're ready to dive into a story that's going to take you on an emotional roller coaster, hit that like button right now. And trust me on this, you're going to want to subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that changes how you see the world. The kind of story that reminds you that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices. Are you ready? Because once I start telling you what happened that night, there's no going back. My name is Camille. And 3 months ago, I was just another face in the crowd. I run a small photography business in New York, the kind where you take whatever gigs you can get to pay rent. Corporate events, weddings, charity galas, anything that pays the bills. I'd gotten used to being invisible in these spaces. Especially at the high-end events, where old money meets new money and everyone's trying to prove they belong. That Thursday night in September, I was working the annual Blackwood Foundation charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. You know, the type: women in dresses that cost more than my car. Men in custom suits discussing their third homes like they're picking up groceries. I was there to capture their perfectly orchestrated generosity. Their carefully staged philanthropy that would end up on society pages and tax write-offs. The event was buzzing about one thing: Adrian Blackwood's engagement announcement. At 30, he was Manhattan's golden boy. The tech billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing, and somehow managed to stay scandal-free in a world where that's almost impossible. His fiancée, Victoria Sterling, was everything you'd expect: stunning, sophisticated. From the kind of family where money has had time to grow roots. They were the perfect power couple, and everyone knew it. I remember positioning myself near the stage, adjusting my camera settings while they prepared for the big moment. Adrian looked nervous, which I thought was sweet. Here's this guy who commands boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, and he's fidgeting like a schoolboy. Victoria was radiant beside him, her smile so perfect it could have been painted on. They looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Like they were born to stand together under those crystal chandeliers. The crowd erupted in applause as Adrian slipped the ring on her finger. I captured it, all: the kiss, the embrace, the way Victoria's eyes sparkled as she showed off what had to be a 10-carat diamond. Everyone was celebrating, champagne flowing, congratulations echoing through the ballroom. It was the kind of moment that makes you believe in fairy tales, even when you're just the person paid to document other people's happiness. But then something happened that I'll never forget. As the crowd dispersed and I was packing up my equipment, Adrian appeared beside me. Not the confident billionaire from the stage, but someone who looked absolutely terrified. His hand grabbed my arm, and he leaned in close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else: pure desperation. "Don't let me marry her," he whispered, his voice shaking in a way that made my blood run cold. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Here was Adrian Blackwood, the man who'd just announced his engagement to hundreds of Manhattan's elite, begging a stranger to save him from his own wedding. My first instinct was to back away. Rich people's problems weren't my problems, and I had enough drama in my own life without getting tangled up in whatever this was. But something in his eyes stopped me. This wasn't some cold feet moment or billionaire tantrum. This was pure terror, the kind that makes your hands shake and your voice crack. He glanced around nervously, making sure no one was watching us, then pulled me into a quiet corner near the service entrance. "I know how this sounds," he said, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "But I'm trapped, and I don't know who else to turn to. She's been watching me, controlling everything I do. If I try to leave, she'll destroy everything I've built." The story that poured out of him was like something from a thriller movie. Victoria wasn't just his fiancée, she was his blackmailer. 2 years ago, she'd approached him at a similar event, charming and sophisticated, everything he thought he wanted, but after they started dating, she began digging into his past, his business dealings, his personal life. She claimed to have evidence that his company had engaged in illegal practices during its early startup days. The thing is, Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper, I was young and desperate when I started the company. I made some questionable decisions, cut some corners. Nothing major, but enough to ruin me if it came out the wrong way. She has documents, recordings, emails, everything, perfectly organized to make me look like a criminal. He explained how Victoria had been using this information to control every aspect of his life, who he socialized with, which business deals he pursued, even what charities he supported. The engagement wasn't a celebration of love, it was the final piece of her plan to secure access to his fortune permanently. She's not just after my money, he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. She wants to control the entire Blackwood empire. Once we're married, she'll have legal access to everything, and if I ever try to leave, she'll release everything she has on me. I felt sick listening to him. This wasn't just blackmail, it was psychological torture. Here was a man who commanded respect in boardrooms around the world, reduced to begging a photographer for help because he couldn't see a way out of his own engagement. Why me? I asked, still trying to process everything he'd told me. Because you're invisible to her, he said simply. She doesn't see you as a threat. You can move through these events, observe, maybe find something I can use to protect myself. I've been looking for evidence of her real plans, proof that she's manipulating me, but she's too smart. She knows I'm watching. The desperation in his voice was heartbreaking. But I wasn't about to become someone's spy just because they had money troubles. I should have walked away right then. Should have packed up my camera, gone home, and pretended this conversation never happened. But something about Adrian's terror felt genuine in a way that cut through all the wealth and glamour. Maybe it was because I recognized what it felt like to be powerless, to have someone hold your future in their hands. So, against every instinct screaming at me to run, I agreed to help. The plan was simple. I would use my photographer access to get close to Victoria's circle, document anything suspicious, and look for evidence of her manipulation. Adrian gave me a list of upcoming events where she'd be present, along with details about her closest friends and business associates. What started as a favor quickly became an obsession. Over the next few weeks, I found myself at gallery openings, charity luncheons, and private parties I never would have been invited to otherwise. Victoria was everywhere, always perfectly dressed, always saying the right things. But when you're looking for cracks in someone's facade, you start to notice things others miss. The first red flag came at a museum fundraiser. I was photographing the silent auction when I overheard Victoria on the phone in what she thought was a private corner. She was discussing Adrian's schedule with someone, but not in the way a loving fiancé would. She was talking about managing his exposure and controlling the narrative. The tone was cold, clinical, like she was discussing a business acquisition rather than her future husband. Then came the art gallery opening where I witnessed something that made my blood run cold. Victoria was talking to another wealthy socialite about a previous relationship, casually mentioning how she'd helped her ex-boyfriend's business partner understand the importance of discretion. The way she smiled when she said it, the subtle threat in her voice, it was clear this wasn't her first time using people's secrets against them. But the real breakthrough came when I started paying attention to her assistant, a nervous young woman named Rebecca who seemed to jump every time Victoria spoke. During a charity auction, I caught Rebecca in the bathroom, clearly upset after a harsh conversation with Victoria. When I offered her a tissue, she broke down and started talking about how impossible Victoria was to work for, how she demanded access to everything and everyone in Adrian's life. She has files on everyone, Rebecca whispered, looking around nervously. Not just Adrian, everyone he knows, everyone he does business with. She says it's research, but it feels like she's building weapons. That's when I realized Adrian's situation was even worse than he'd described. Victoria wasn't just blackmailing him, she was systematically gathering information on his entire network, positioning herself to control not just his life, but his entire business empire. The woman I'd photographed looking so perfect and in love was actually a predator. And Adrian was just her latest target. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I spent the next week digging deeper, and what I found made my stomach turn. Victoria's manipulation wasn't just about money, it was about power, control, and the complete destruction of anyone who got in her way. But I also discovered something else that changed everything. While going through the evidence Adrian had shown me, something didn't add up. The documents looked too perfect, too convenient, so I did what any good photographer does. I looked at the details. The metadata on the digital files was wrong. The timestamps didn't match the supposed dates. The email headers had been altered. My heart started racing as I realized what this meant. Victoria's evidence against Adrian wasn't just manipulative, was completely fabricated. She'd been blackmailing him with fake documents, forged emails, and manufactured evidence that would never hold up under real scrutiny. I was about to call Adrian when my phone rang. It was Rebecca, Victoria's assistant, and she was crying. "She knows," Rebecca whispered. "She knows you've been asking questions. She's planning something for tonight's gala. She said she's going to make an example of you." The Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala was supposed to be Victoria's moment to shine, her final performance before the wedding. Instead, it became the stage for her downfall. I arrived early, my camera bag loaded with printed copies of everything I'd discovered. Adrian was already there, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. "She's been watching you," he warned. "She knows you're investigating. Maybe we should call this off." But I wasn't backing down. Not when I finally understood the full scope of what Victoria had been doing. She wasn't just a blackmailer, she was a serial manipulator who'd been using fake evidence to control wealthy men for years. Adrian was just her latest victim, but he wouldn't be her last. The confrontation happened during the silent auction. Victoria cornered me near the coat check, her perfect smile never wavering even as her eyes burned with rage. "You think you're so clever," she said quietly, "but you have no idea who you're dealing with. I can destroy your little photography business with a single phone call. I can make sure you never work in this city again." "Really?" I replied, pulling out my phone. "Because I think you're the one who has no idea what you're dealing with." I'd been recording everything through my phone app, and now I played back her threat for everyone nearby to hear. But more importantly, I pulled out the printed evidence of her fraud, the fake documents, the forged emails, the manufactured evidence she'd been using to blackmail Adrian. "This is what real evidence looks like," I said, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "And this is what a fraud looks like." The look of shock on Victoria's face was priceless. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked exactly like what she was, a caught criminal with nowhere to run. What happened next was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. The crowd at the gala had heard everything: threats, my evidence, the revelation that she'd been blackmailing Adrian with fake documents. Within minutes, phones were out, videos were being recorded, and the whispers started spreading through Manhattan's elite like wildfire. Victoria tried to salvage the situation, claiming I was lying, that I was some obsessed photographer trying to break up a happy couple. But when Adrian stepped forward and confirmed everything I'd said, when he publicly admitted he'd been trapped in an engagement built on lies and manipulation, her story fell apart completely. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By the next morning, Victoria's name was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. Other victims started coming forward: wealthy men who'd been targeted by her schemes, business associates who'd been manipulated, even former friends who'd been used as stepping stones in her climb to power. It turned out I'd uncovered just the tip of the iceberg. Within a week, Victoria was facing criminal charges for fraud, blackmail, and identity theft. The fake documents she'd used weren't just lies, they were sophisticated forgeries that constituted serious federal crimes. Her family's old money connections couldn't protect her from the FBI investigation that followed. But the real karma came in how completely she lost everything she'd worked so hard to obtain. The social circle that had welcomed her so warmly turned their backs overnight. The exclusive events that had been her hunting ground banned her permanently. The wealthy lifestyle she'd built through manipulation crumbled as her assets were frozen during the investigation. Adrian, meanwhile, was finally free. The relief in his eyes when he called off the engagement was heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. He'd spent 2 years living in fear, controlled by someone who'd made him believe he was a criminal. Learning that Victoria's evidence was fake didn't just clear his name, it gave him back his life. As for me, well, that's where this story gets really interesting. Word spread quickly through Manhattan's social circles about how a photographer had exposed one of the most sophisticated fraud schemes they'd ever seen. My phone started ringing nonstop with clients who wanted someone they could trust. Someone who would tell them the truth, even when it wasn't pretty. But the most unexpected part came 6 months later. Adrian and I had stayed in touch throughout the investigation, and somewhere between late-night phone calls about legal proceedings and coffee meetings to discuss the case, we'd become something more. Not because of gratitude or obligation, but because we'd seen each other at our most vulnerable and found something real. The woman who'd been invisible in the background had become the center of her own story. And sometimes, that's exactly how karma works. It doesn't just punish the guilty, it rewards the brave. So there you have it, the story of how I went from being just another face in the crowd to the woman who brought down Manhattan's most dangerous manipulator. Looking back, I realized that being underestimated was actually my greatest weapon. Victoria never saw me coming because she was too busy controlling everyone she thought mattered. But here's what I learned from this whole experience. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is pay attention. While everyone else was focused on the glamour and the performance, I was watching the details, noticing the cracks, seeing what others missed. That's how I discovered the truth that set Adrian free and brought Victoria's house of lies crashing down. The truth is, we all have more power than we think. Whether you're the photographer in the background, the assistant taking notes, or the person everyone overlooks, you have the ability to see things others can't. You have the power to speak up when something isn't right, to help someone who's trapped, to expose the truth even when it's dangerous. Adrian and I are still together, by the way. We took it slow, made sure our relationship was built on something real rather than trauma bonding or gratitude. He's nothing like the terrified man I met that night. He's confident again, free to make his own choices, and he's using his platform to help other victims of financial manipulation. As for Victoria, she's serving a 5-year sentence for fraud and blackmail. Sometimes, karma needs a little help, but it always finds a way. My photography business is thriving beyond anything I ever imagined. Turns out, when you prove you're willing to tell the truth, even when it's hard, people trust you with their most important moments. I'm not invisible anymore, but I haven't forgotten what it taught me about seeing the world clearly. What do you think? Do you believe that Victoria got exactly what she deserved? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between staying silent and doing what's right? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of powerful people? Did this story change how you think about speaking up when something isn't right? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if it made you believe in justice and karma and the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things, then smash that like button and hit subscribe. I've got more stories like this one. Stories about people who refused to stay silent, who fought back against manipulation and won. Stories that will remind you that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody sees coming. Remember, you're never as powerless as they want you to believe. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to look closer, to ask the right questions, to stand up and say this isn't right. Sometimes that person is you.